Hey everybody, welcome into the Fit Pro Show with David and Hannah. Today is our last episode of our body part series that we've been doing. If you've been along with us for this 5-part series, we've been going through different sections of the body, the front of the legs, back of the legs, core. Last month we did the front of the upper body. Now we're going to go to the back side of that upper body, the posterior chain, and go over kind of form and function of those muscles and just those areas in general. And then this is really an exercise technique series. So we're going to try to take a little bit less time on the front half, so we have plenty of time to go into a bunch of exercises and make sure that everybody is geared up for using some of these different movement patterns today. But yeah, those main muscles that we're going to talk about generally are the back, some different portions of the back, lots of big, strong muscles back there. The rear delts, last month, just a couple weeks ago, we talked about the front and side delts. The rear delts is a super important area just for postural health and a litany of other factors that we can talk about. And then also on the backside are those triceps, those horseshoes that we want to try to grow, and it helps with all of our pressing movements too. But if you want some more ideas for kind of the sets, reps, load, all those types of things, you can review some of our past, you know, episodes that we've done and get some ideas there. And we'll give you some ideas for progression and how to focus on these muscles here today.
Yeah, all sounds good. Like David said, when we're talking about the back, we're talking about a lot of muscles there. So these will probably ring a bell when you're talking your lats, your traps, your rhomboids, your serratus, your rector spinae, all these tons of muscles that pull our shoulders back and go attached along the spine right there is what we're talking about.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the first things that came up when Hannah and I were talking about this episode today was the focus from the front and back side and how we kind of have different variables that we're thinking about from the front and the back. If you remember, before we started talking about the strength training piece last time, we were saying, hey, we really need to focus on mobility too, though, because the chest gets so tight. Those pectoral muscles that we talked about, major and minor, get really tight. And so there, make sure that you're doing your mobility work on the front side, and then on the back side, making sure that we focus on activation. So this strength work that we're talking through today is really needed because we get in those bad positions that are usually lengthened, and we need to make sure that we strengthen those. And that should sound familiar to you because when we sit too much and are just sedentary in general, same thing happens in the lower body too, right? We need to focus on mobility because we're in that hip flexion all the time, really tight through the front side. So we need to do the foam rolling and stretching and all those things that we talk about. And then on the posterior side, if we're talking about the hip, really activating those glutes, which is hard for a lot of people. And we focused on some of those different exercises. That applies to the upper body today too.
Yeah, so you'll hear us all the time when we tell you to like pull your shoulders back and then press them down. We were telling you that when we were doing any pushing exercises or any lower body squats or RDLs, you want to do the exact same thing when you're doing any pulling or back exercises as well. A few like activation techniques to like train to keep our shoulders back and down. I really like to do like hanging scap pulls where you're hanging on the bar and then you have to pull without bending your elbows and pulling you up, but you actually have to train your scaps, your muscles, how to pull those scaps down so we can get into that. That's one of my favorites. I don't know. Do you have any favorite activation exercises?
Yeah, a lot of those. I like mimicking just the movement pattern in general, and I'm really glad that you said that too, because the two things that when we talk about packing the shoulder, and we're going to talk about the specific muscles of how to do this, the thing that we want to do is go down. So that's depression of the scapula and the humerus right there. So packing downward, and when I say that, hopefully some of you went from up here, shrugged up towards those shoulders, to packing downward, right? So we want to do that whether we're seated or standing or moving. And then the other thing is retracting back, because we usually get up here and forward. So to counterbalance that, we're down and back through those retracting muscles. So if you don't mind, Hannah, I'll probably just go straight into some of the muscle talk that we're talking
Yep.
about. So if we're talking about the back, what muscles cause depression? Going downward, and I mean depression in a good way. That just means those shoulders going down. It's the term that they use. But the lats, right, the latissimus dorsi, right here underneath, they go all the way down towards that rib cage, kind of up through that armpit area. That's one of those huge muscles that helps pull downward. And when you do that, you should feel underneath your armpit in that lat. You should feel that activation going on. So that's one of the main muscles of the back. And when we do our vertical pulling, there's vertical pulling that we do and horizontal pulling, like rowing, that we do. That the first thing that you need to do is pull downward with those lats. Another muscle that helps you do that are the traps, the trapezius. So there's a upper, middle, and lower trap. Those upper and middle traps are going to help you also pull downward as well. So knowing where those muscles are, whether it's the lats or the traps that run all the way up here and then really all the way down both sides of the spine, knowing where they're at and also how they function is going to be helpful to kind of your exercise selection and just having that mind muscle connection when you're doing some of these exercises. And so depression was one of those things that we talked about, pulling downward. Retraction is the other one. Those muscles that Hannah was just talking about help with that, whether it's the rhomboid major or the rhomboid minor, connected just like over that scapula that we talk about so much, that bony structure, that scapula. It's just over top of that. And it helps you pull backward in those rows, in that retraction. You can feel, when you feel that mid-back squeeze, it's usually that rhomboid area. And then the same thing, that trap, that middle trap that we talked about, that also helps you pull downward, helps you retract straight back. So hopefully that kind of paints a picture of some of those main muscles, not just where they're at, but kind of how we use them. And extended from the back are the rear delts. So we talked about the front and the side delts. And then if we have the rear delts, it's just another head of the deltoid muscle. But since we're talking about the posterior chain, it fits perfectly here. And it's just another way to reinforce that pulling backwards. And we're going to show you some exercises here in a bit. Anything you wanted to add to that before we get into triceps?
I think you kind of touched on everything. I think
Okay.
we also can think about those are a lot of like the superficial layers or medial a little bit, but we'll even have other muscles that are deeper than that attached to the spine that run down, and there's really fun, intricate names for those. So just like when you're ever Googling back muscles, you're gonna get a fat list. But
There's so many,
if we we want to focus on these main muscles that do the movements, and then a lot of those other meaty or movements can also hit those muscles as well. Sorry, I was trying to read and talk at the same time, so my brain got confused.
Yeah, you're good. No, that's a really good point, because some of them are deeper and some of them are more superficial. So I think we have the back covered. If you just want to talk about the triceps a little bit, and then we'll go into some exercises for sure.
Yeah, so triceps, it's in the name, tri. So there's actually 3 parts to the tricep, but a lot of people will actually just kind of be like, oh, it's like they think of it as one muscle, and that kind of how we train it. We kind of think about it as one muscle in a way because they all work together. So we've got the long head, the lateral head, and the medial head, and it's just different locations on the backside of that arm that forms that tricep. And just by doing different exercises, you can target different regions of that tricep. But most of the time, like anytime we're doing extension of that elbow in any way, whether it even is a close grip bench press or tricep extension or skull crusher, anything like that, we're just going to be hitting all of the tricep. It's all going to be working together.
Yeah, and I think it's good too, just like I kind of mentioned the vertical pull and the horizontal pulling, having a different, and I talked about this a little bit with the bicep, changing that angle where you're pushing through the tricep. It's all going to be extension through that tricep no matter what. But is it more of a dip where you're moving through the shoulder? Are we getting up overhead? Are we doing like a kickback variation? Those things will keep you kind of not keep your muscles guessing, but hit those different heads of the tricep that Hannah was just talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So those are the main muscles, kind of that form and function that we wanted to talk through. We talked about, the front versus the back side, and then before we get into our exercises, reasons to train the back, proper posture. I say it all the time. Making sure that you're pulling more than you're pushing is always a good idea, even if it's a little bit more. If you can pull a lot more than you're pushing, that's great. Not just the amount of sets that you're doing, but the reps and the loadage that you're doing is really going to help that postural health too. Heavier rep ranges with those bigger muscles of the back, and then some lighter rep ranges with those smaller muscles around the shoulder. So posture is definitely up there. I mentioned too, there's big, strong muscles that are adaptable to growth. So whether you want to get bigger or stronger or just healthier and increase that endurance and resilience, you can really see some changes. Since these are such big muscles, you can see some changes kind of quickly, and it looks cool. That's a great reason to train the back too. It just looks cool. You want your back to feel good, but kind of look angry when you flex it. That's kind of how I think about it. And any other reasons that you have for the back? Those are
I think
three pretty good ones, right?
yeah, that was a good point of what you said about it looks cool. Like, who doesn't want a chiseled back? Is what I said in our team's post. Because if you start to build those back muscles and lose some body fat, there are so many muscles like we're seeing. You can start to see the definition of all of them. And David and I have both been able to like see that based off of our training and when we're doing pull-ups or lat pull downs, and you just feel so like strong and capable. And so not only is it awesome like having a strong back to pull things or pick up things even and have good posture, but I mean you look jacked. Like it also, if you're one of those ladies that want that hourglass figure, training the lats in the back helps with that figure because you can get those muscles bigger and then it makes the waist look smaller. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just the proportions in general. And I have a bit of a bodybuilding background, so I know when I would get super lean, like the bottom, even just like the erectors kind of look like a Christmas tree going up, and you see all the striations. So that's, if you're into that's not for everybody, but just knowing and seeing that is really cool for that kind of connection too. But yeah, if you just want to change those proportions, anything like that, that's good. But when we talk about the main cues that we're using, doesn't change too much. The main cues, as you've seen from the lower body to the upper body, are the same. Kind of, either gripping the ground with your feet or gripping whatever you're holding on to, squeeze and tight, engage your core, tighten your core, squeeze those glutes, look straight ahead. Now we're talking about the shoulders a little bit. So you want that chest up, and then the packed shoulders that we just talked about, down and back. That's what packed means. If you ever hear me say that, down and back, and just keeping that back flat is a really good place to start.
Mm-hmm. All right, I think we're ready to start going into our exercises. So we're gonna
Let's do it.
Just real quick, just like what we were saying on last month's episode, we had like horizontal push and or vertical push. Same thing with our posterior side. We have vertical pull and horizontal pull. So David's gonna start us off with our vertical pull exercises.
Yeah, so for our vertical pull down, that's exactly where I start with, either a cable or a band pull down. I'm just using a single band and kind of threading the needle here and putting a loop, so I have some built-in handles right here. And you can change elbow position on these sometimes, okay? So I usually start with people in a little bit safer, more natural, kind of inverted with those elbows forward. You want to start those hands all the way up. I have this nice flat back. And what did we say we're doing at the shoulders? Pulling downward. So pull down through the shoulders and then follow through with those arms. So think of two distinct pulls, even if it's nice and smooth and looks like, look, I can do both at the same time because I've been doing this for a little while, right? But if you want to make them distinct, you can really get a feel for how your shoulders actually work. So if you slow it down, do one pull through the shoulder, depress down, and then the second pull. And then when you bring those elbows down, I'm feeling those lats big time right here. So that's a great way to start. You can also go a little bit wider and do those same things where we're pulling down and it's a little different emphasis. When we're pulling out this way, that's not what I start with most people, more of a wide grip, but it does emphasize the muscles in a different way, kind of like we talked about the different heads of the triceps, right? So that's a really good one to start with our band work. Obviously, you can do pull-ups, and I set that up the same way. When it's somebody that needs some help on the pull-ups, I just put that band up there. They have some band assistance. There's also machines that will help with that assistance along the way too. But it's all those same cues we just talked about, but now you're using your own body weight. Don't need anything except something to hold on to. So it's that same thing. We're here, start with that dead hang. You can pull up through the shoulder, up through those arms, down under control. That's a really important part, okay? Because going up is great, but if you can't control that eccentric, you're not gonna get the most out of the back, out of the biceps, all of those things, okay? So those are the two primary.
There's a subtle flex of David talking while he's doing slow eccentric pull-ups.
True.
So yeah, and like what he was doing with the bands, that's the same thing as the lat pull down machine. You can put tons of different attachments on there, and same like what he just said with the pull-ups is you want to also control on the way up. So many people will go down and then it jerks them up, like down and jerks them up. So same thing, that control both directions to get the most out of that. We don't want to see you jerking and doing the yanking. I'm not a big fan of CrossFit kipping pull-ups. I want that slow, controlled movement, utilizing the back muscles in a safe environment. So slow down those reps, lat pull downs, band pull downs, pull-ups, slow them down. That's how you're going to get stronger. It's how you're going to be able to do those pull-ups if that's one of your goals.
Yes, totally.
All right.
Row time.
Yeah, so I'm going to go into rows. So when we're doing rows, I might need you to do an inverted row for me, David, if you have that set up.
Yeah,
but
sure.
basically, row is anything that we're doing like horizontal pulling. So no longer are our arms going up and pulling down. We're rowing horizontally. Beginner, usually I'll start with an inverted row just because it is very challenging for people to get into the proper position to do a bent over row with their back. It is that RDL form that we've talked about, okay? So tons of different rows, cables, TRX inverted row. That's one where basically you're going to be leaning backwards, holding on to the strand, and then you're going to pull forward and back. So David has shown you right there. So feet are walked out. You're still doing a horizontal pull without putting any stress on those hamstrings and low back. You can still train all those muscles in a different way, just like that. Goal is to keep the body nice and flat. And then you could even start to walk your feet further towards the wall, and that's going to make it a lot more challenging. The more parallel you can get with the floor, obviously, gravity is going to make things a lot harder.
So it's really easy to overload that, right? Because the more vertical you are, it's going to feel like nothing because you're not pulling against gravity at all. Then the closer you get down towards that ground, you'll feel it just by moving your feet just a little bit. So a really good way to, again, just with body weight overload there.
Yep, exactly. And so once my clients have really mastered those, we're going to move on and start using some dumbbells or barbells. We're still going to have usually a bench to support us. So you can put I don't have a bench in this room, but you can put a bench at an incline and lay with your chest on it, have the dumbbells down, and then you're going to row right there. So then you don't have that stress in the low back. What we can do next is start going into a single arm row this is my makeshift bench today. So one knee on, one hand down, and then we can get a flat back and then pull towards that hip right there. You can even do a single arm bent over row without the knee down, where you have those hips backwards and you're getting nice and flat. The progression to move from there, once you're like, all right, I want to actually train my back even more and take out the support, you're going to have to train your body to do that good form with the RDL. So we're going into barbell rows, or you can still do 2-arm dumbbell bent over rows. We've got underhand and we've got overhand. So I'll explain that in a second. But shoulders are back, pack the lats. Like I said, you got to slide down into that RDL position. So you need to figure out how to put that pelvis into that anterior tilt before we get there. And then you need to be able to hold this without pain, pull to your belly button and release down. Nice and controlled. What you'll start to see is once you go heavier, like this is what we're seeing go on. So we want to stay in that good RDL position, pulling up and down. What I mentioned about the overhand, underhand, when it trains the back a little bit different, like we were saying. When I do overhand, I'm usually a little bit wider and it's going to hit the upper back a little bit more. So I still get in that same position, but I'm going to just hit a little bit, those muscles a little bit higher. And then when I get that underhand, I'm a little bit closer and I'm going to hit those lats a little bit more lower and a few of those other muscles down there in the lower side. Yeah.
Yeah, and some of those subtle changes, like Hannah was just saying, are the same muscle groups we're hitting, but different fibers within those muscle groups. And some people can feel a little bit more. I like going underhand sometimes with folks if they're already like this all day, right? Like we talk about. So you can get into that better postural position and then pull, and it gives sometimes a more intense contraction for different people. I know I can feel that sometimes if I'm going a little bit lighter. But you saw when Hannah was doing that it wasn't, she mentioned not doing the hip hinge and herky jerky coming up like that. Also staying nice and flat through that spine, moving all the way through protraction, not moving through the spine, right? Staying strong through that rigid spine, but we're going all the way down and getting the stretch through all those muscles and then retracting and pulling back, all right? Because that's the main thing when we're doing these horizontal rows, that retraction, those rhomboids that we talked about, right? And those mid traps. So think about that protraction and retraction throughout the entire range of motion.
What I'll see a lot with these is that people don't extend their arm all the way and let that protraction retraction happen. So they'll just kind of like stay in this where they're still getting a workout in, but they're not getting it to the extent that they could. So that's where it's like slowing down, feeling the whole movement shift of that protraction and retraction. And these exercises show you very easily when you're picking up too much weight. You'll notice right away that like your bent over rows is you're like up here at some point. You're no longer parallel with the floor because it's too heavy. So, and you're noticing you have to have momentum and movement in the hips to get the weight up. Don't be afraid to drop the weight down. The form is obviously most important out of all of it.
Yeah. So if you're feeling, for example, she talked about not moving through that shoulder. If you're just feeling your bicep, when you're doing exercises that are supposed to be a back exercise, that's how you know you're not using that full range of motion and maybe too much weight. So if on your back exercises, you have an excellent bicep pump, but you're not really feeling anything on the back side, do exactly what we just said. Take those weights lighter, go through that full range of motion and focus on all of those big muscle groups that we talked about.
Yes. And one more thing that caught in my head, when we're doing the rows, it's really easy to bend our arms too much right here. So we do get it more bicep. You always want to think like you're pulling towards your hip a little bit so you can get that full retraction and extension of that shoulder.
Yeah, if it starts looking like you're pulling upward like that looks more like a curl, right? Pulling backward. That's what we want to see. Good point.
Yeah.
Okay, rear delts. Let's go into it. So one that I use all the time. This is something you can do at your desk if you don't have a band, if you or even if you have a little light band at your desk or wherever you're at. You're going into a band pull apart. I love this exercise. We're just starting with those hands straight forward. Again, reaching actively forward, okay? And then we're going to come all the way back with this band. I'm squeezing those shoulder blades together. I don't change that angle of my arm the entire time, and then nice and slow going forward. So it can be fast going back, right? That 1 second pull. What a lot of people do is they don't have that 2 or 3 second resisting the tension of the band, that eccentric, right? Where we're lengthening. That's what you want. So this is a great one. You could also, if you have like a dual cable at your gym, you could cross those over and do the exact same movement pattern, a little bit more loading capacity with that, or just get a heavier band. And then with the pull apart too, I like kind of going diagonal pull apart as well. Again, different fibers of similar muscles, maybe going into the lat a little bit more, maybe going into the upper trap a little bit more, but you're just alternating, doing that movement pattern side to side like that, and it adds a little bit of variation to get away from that staleness and kind of works it in a little bit different way.
Yeah, I always tell people try not to have any lax in the band. You want to try to keep tension on it the whole time. And that forces them to not let it like fling their arms forward and let that happen.
Yes.
And also you might not be strong enough to start with your arms directly straight forward. You might have to start with one strand of the band and have with it wider. And then as you get stronger, you can probably increase the resistance by getting those hands closer together.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay, good points. And then so that made me think of one other thing. I just mentioned that you want the same amount of bend. Locked out is the easiest one because that's not going anywhere, right? But I say that because I see this.
Yeah, triceps.
No
We're not
shoulder
doing
movement
triceps
going on.
yet.
Yeah, exactly. No shoulder movement going on. So make sure that we're moving front and back through those shoulders. I got one more here for the rear delts before we finish with triceps, though. It's just our face pull. So instead of going backwards like this with those arms, now we're going to bend at that elbow. So we go into that retraction back, think first pull, and then second pull, following through with those elbows again. So we're all the way back right here. Through that first pull, I feel that subtlety of everything turning on. When I come all the way back here, I feel everything in that upper back just turning on. So if you have, I have a rope right here, I have it connected to a band. Of course, you can use a cable or anything like that, a band, whatever band setup you have. You can do it standing, you can do it half kneeling. I'm going to do one calf spiked right here and then just one forward to kind of counterbalance. And then that same movement pattern I just told you about, reaching forward, letting it pull forward, back with the shoulders, back with those elbows all the way forward like that. All right. And
Yeah, I think
those
face
are
pulls.
basically the main two that I do. You could do a dumbbell reverse fly or use
Mhm.
other types of weight and stuff like that. But those are the two movement patterns that we want to hit.
Yeah, face pulls are one of my
David,
favorite.
when you did that, you were pulling back at an angle. So, um, it, do you recommend being horizontal or at an upward angle when you do that? What's the better
Yeah,
position for the
you can.
rope or?
Yeah, so you can change it so it's a bit of a pull down, or you can have it straightforward ahead of you. I like when it's straightforward ahead of you right there. This was kind of makeshift to show that off, so it was
Okay,
a little bit
okay.
high. But yeah, we want to make sure that, especially with those elbows out, it starts to be kind of trap dominant sometimes. So you want to make sure that we're depressed and then pulling straight back. And when we do that, we're not. It's easy to go out and then elevate throughout that.
Mhm.
So making sure those lats pull you down and you're just pulling straight back.
So if you're doing that with a stack of weights, you can put the rope parallel to your chest or level chest level, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Yep.
Exactly.
thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yep.
hmm
Sure.
Yeah, I think face pulls are one of my favorite exercises.
Yeah, and it's something that you can do all the time for sure.
hmm One,
Triceps.
yeah, right before triceps, there's
Okay.
another exercise that I see people do a lot in the gym and I do myself.
Mhm.
Are lat pulls with the cable and the band instead of like lat pull down. So this one right here where you hinge a little bit and then we pull down. You might feel it a little bit in your triceps, but yeah, right here where we're moving through a range of motion, that's really going to target this section of the lats. And you're going to kind of, you might even notice that that part is weak because that's really hard, just because the other rest of the fibers of our lats are dominant. So that's just a fun little plug-in exercise.
Yes.
Um, last, like quickly, I'm just going to go over the triceps. Mainly when I think of tricep exercises, I'm thinking of a push down, an extension, or a dip. So extension is going to be anytime like we have the weights overhead. I have them on the floor, but we're extending up right here. We're lying on our back doing skull crushers, extending up. The key here, what we'll see a lot is like people will move their shoulders with it and get that lat reach like we were just talking about. But again, when you're training the triceps, it's usually a single joint movement, nice and controlled. You want to do a little bit higher rep ranges here, a little bit lighter weight. We're not going to be going our heaviest weights doing 8 reps. It's going to be put a lot of stress on that elbow joint and it will be really hard to hold the form correctly. And then dips I love, but it is really easy to torque the shoulder a lot when you're doing dips, especially if you're doing them incorrectly. So dips are a great body weight exercise. You can just throw in. I'll use a box or anything like this, make it easier with those knees bent. Try to keep my body upright as much as I can. elbows drop back and go up. You're going to also work on some range of motion with that shoulder joint. Just down and up, you'll make it harder by extending those legs out. And then you can also even add some weight onto those thighs if you want. And then we have just regular bars that David has back there where you would go dip down and up. And there's the assisted dip machine as well. Just try not to, when you're doing that, lean forward too much, just because that puts a lot of torque on that anterior shoulder. But some forward lean is going to happen, but we want to try to stay as upright as we can.
So for the, and agree with everything. So for if you want to go a little bit heavier with those rep ranges, make sure it's a compound movement. Make sure it's that dip or that close grip bench press. If you want to go a little bit heavier, like you know, maybe 7, 8, all the way up to like 10 to 12 reps. And then when it's that single joint, like Hannah was saying, where you're only moving at the elbow, skull crusher, push down, overhead extension, that's when you bump those weights down a little bit and the reps up a little bit as like a supplemental accessory exercise.
Yeah. And I did want to point out that what, like we're saying, when you're just trying to change in the angle of things, like I a lot of times like to just do plain and simple cable press downs like that. But like yesterday, I turned around and did it overhead like that. And I did the same weight basically. And like my triceps are way sore than they normally are. So just changing it up, like your muscle fibers, even though you're like, this shouldn't make me sore, it's a different way of your body moving and you will feel it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good point. And that's that subtle change that you make. If you want to, again, muscle soreness doesn't mean growth, doesn't mean you're necessarily getting better, but it means you did some damage. So if you like feeling that, then throw in a new exercise every once in a while and you'll feel that. If you want to stay away from that, then just keep hitting those same exercises and trying to get a little bit better, add those sets, reps, or weight along the way. But I think that's all that we have for you today. This has been an amazing series. I've really enjoyed it, Hannah, and everybody on. It's been cool. We got to hit all of those major muscle groups, and then when we are back in December, because we still do have another Fit Pro show this year, that first week of December, we're kind of going to review some of the stuff that we talked about this year, and then get y'all ready for the holidays too. You know, what are some of those ways that we need to be moving? How can we implement movement into our holiday season? How can we still enjoy our family and friends and good foods and all of those things without going overboard and getting off track with our goals? So that's what we're going to end with in December, and I'm looking forward to seeing y'all then.
Yeah, thank you, team. And our next program coming up is the Turkey Trot. So make sure you look at your emails and sign up for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right. Happy November.
All right, y'all. Yeah, I know, November. How about that?
All right.
See you guys.